Welcome to Living with Purpose. I have truly an extraordinary guest with me today. Trish Millines Dziko, her journey is just extraordinary. And she's going to share a little bit about that. But let me just kind of share a little bit myself. Growing up, a single parent in Maryland, wanting to be a basketball player, lands up in the software technology industry as a black woman
Mhm.
in the late 80s, early 90s, goes through that journey to rise to the top and then decides to give all of that up just because she decided that she wanted to focus on getting other black kids into technology. Today, she is the founder and the head of the TAF, which is the Technology Access Foundation and the Technology Access Academy, where she is working with youth and getting them into technology, especially from the minority community. But more importantly, today, Trish is actually getting us to rethink education and how kids and all of us learn. So please join me in welcoming Trish Millines Dziko to the Living with Purpose podcast. Trish, welcome.
Thank you. I'm excited.
Yeah, so now that I've set you up, start off. Tell us your story. This is just one of the most amazing stories you'll get to hear.
Yeah. So, I'm a boomer. I'm going to start there. So we do things a little different. Uh, I'm actually from New Jersey and I was adopted by an older woman and grew up as an only child. And I really do. I have seven other siblings. So who I've met, I know them. But growing up in Jersey, I grew up in South Belmar. It was a segregated town. So Belmar is where most of the white people lived, and South Belmar is where most of the black people lived. And I was really interested. I had a natural knack for engineering. I took things apart. I wanted to know how they work. Really good at math. So when I ended up choosing a major for college, I actually chose engineering. Went to Monmouth College on a full ride basketball scholarship. I chose engineering, but then I had to move to computer science because the engineering labs were at the same time as my practice, and I couldn't afford to go to college any other way. So I changed majors, which turned out to be a good thing because I had enough of that engineering background that my first few jobs were writing software for hardware. I made my way to Seattle via Philadelphia, working for Computer Sciences Corporation, Tucson, working for Hughes Aircraft Corporation, San Francisco, working for Fortune Systems. And then when I moved to Seattle in 1985, I worked for a company called Telecalc. And that's where I got that first glimpse of a PC that I could fully control. And also a multi-user operating system called DR-DOS. I don't know if you remember that. And there were a few Microsoft people that defected from Microsoft for a minute, and they were the beginnings of Windows object-oriented programming. So I learned a little something from them. I ended up leaving Telecal and contracting at Microsoft and then became a full-time employee. So I started at Microsoft in 88, working in the SQL Server group. And I stayed in that group for 4.5 years and then moved to TechNet. I don't know if you remember TechNet, but it was a CD that this is before the web, you guys, before the web. It's a CD that we published every month with white papers and experiences from people using the Microsoft Systems products. And from there, I went to the hardware group where I proudly was the program manager for the Easy Ball, which was a mouse that parents could work with their toddlers at the same time as using the adult mouse. And that kind of harked back to my experience of writing software for hardware. Then I moved over to the diversity department because I had been doing all this work all the time at Microsoft, going on college recruitment trips and sell dinners for high level people, people of color that Microsoft wanted to bring in. And then finally said, why don't I just do this at Microsoft? And they created a position for me in the diversity department. And I stayed there for about a year and a half and sort of realized that we're never going to change the number of people of color, particularly underrepresented folks in the tech sector, as long as everybody has that if it ain't broke, don't fix it mentality. And while I was in the diversity group, I ran the high school internship program. So I saw the potential out there and it spent about a year thinking about what am I going to do and decided to just leave and start a nonprofit that supported kids of color in the Seattle area getting the skills they need. Because when we ran the high school internship program, it was based off of potential, right? Because none of them were programming, none of them were really using software in a meaningful way, and there was no real internet at that time. So being able to get them those skills that they needed so that they can be more effective as high school interns, get into college, be college interns, and then get into industry. So I left and said, well, if it doesn't work out, I can always come back. But here I am 28 years later.
So you make this sound like it was such a simple, seamless journey, which I know it was not.
It was not.
So talk a little bit about what you had to go through as a Black woman that was being subjected to all sorts of innuendo, going
Yeah.
into to a completely white male dominated industry. How you were able to build your resilience.
So, yeah, I started with the sort of high level. When I first got into the industry, I mean, really, I can go all the way back to college where there were only three of us students that were black in the computer science program. And we were never offered any opportunity to apply for internships, but everybody else was. I can go back to my first job where I was clearly an affirmative action hire. And I found out that one of my colleagues, who I became friends with, was a psychology major, no programming experience, but she was making $10,000 more than me. And that's when the light bulbs just sort of clicked off for me. Like, this is going to be really different. It's going to be even more different than when I was in college because we didn't have anybody mentoring us and getting us ready for the industry. We were just, we graduated, got our degrees, and, got a job. When I left Computer Sciences Corporation, I went to Hughes Aircraft, and, Hughes Aircraft has retired military people working there who are much older, who have a variety of folks working there. This was in Tucson. And I remember distinctly the way I was treated by not my manager, but the person I was supposed to be working with. And he clearly didn't want me there. And he made sure he let me know in a variety of ways. Fortunately for me, my manager I was able to go talk to him about it. And some of the racist statements and things like that stopped. But you have to remember, I was 22 years old. By then, I was almost 23. And you can't, as a young person, especially back then, there's only so much you could say, right? So I just kind of went along, changed departments because I made friends with people in the word processing department, in the business department, and ended up moving over there and really adding value. That's when I realized I had value. I really added value to their work by developing processes and software to help them move through their work easier and more efficiently. And that's when I just, realized that not only do I have value, that I have an opportunity to grow. These people gave me an opportunity to grow. So there are indeed nice people that I can connect with in the industry. When I moved to San Francisco, working for Fortune Systems, I had a really great manager, an African American man who saw that in me. He saw my potential and put me in higher positions that I wouldn't have gotten anywhere else. I was a test expert because when I was at computer sciences and used aircraft, I wrote software to test hardware. So I had that theory in my head and the processes in my head. So he saw all that in me and helped me see that I can build the whole test department that they never had. And that's when I started really gaining some traction. So by the time I got up to Seattle, I had all this experience and I was hired as a manager at Teleaccount. I had no problems there. So by then I'm 27 and you get better with age, you get more confident with age. Anybody that came at me sideways, I just came right back at them. So that I started getting those tools. Like, you're not going to tell me what I can't do. You're not going to talk over me. I have something to say. You have something to say. I'm going to listen to you. I need you to listen to me. People saw that. So by the time I got to Microsoft, I told folks that if I had to come to Microsoft right out of college, I wouldn't have made it. I got to Microsoft, I was 30 years old already. And I could hold my own. I could advocate for other people. And on a regular basis, I sat in meetings where, that whole back then, the characteristic of a program manager is somebody who's like driving and pounding on the table and yelling. And I didn't do any of that because that's not who I am. But I was able to come to the table and express who I am. And then I helped start Blacks at Microsoft. I was part of Hoppers, which was just a women's group. And I was also part of MS Gia, which was the Latino group. And then Gleam, which was the gay and lesbian groups. I was in all of these circles, and all of these people gave me a little extra energy, a little extra purpose. But it didn't make it easy. I still had to be aware of everything around me. I had to be aware of people on business visits and college visits and having people look at me like, oh, you're, assuming I'm in something other than being a programmer or like I'm some magical, mystical person who kind of made it through. So I had to really set people straight on that. I think still today, I see that in how people treat kids, how people treat professionals of color. Just that whole idea of anybody who's successful is by some miracle. That's kind of the attitude.
Mm. So, talk a little bit about the Technology Access Foundation and what you have done and some of your major accomplishments.
The first thing we did was we had an internship program for high school kids. And, you do what you know, since I ran that program at Microsoft. And we had this technical teams internship program. And we had them for all through high school, 8 months out the year. And we would provide programming, network engineering, media production, and website development classes. They come to us 2 days a week, 3 hours each time. So that's a commitment all through those 8 months. We gave them job readiness training and college readiness, and then gave them an opportunity to apply for paid summer internships. So we had to do work on the other side to recruit companies. And one thing we were very clear about with the companies is this is not a set aside. We're not saying you have to give the kids these jobs. We're saying they need to earn it and we're going to prepare them for it. And we needed to be very clear about that because we didn't want them making kids feel like, oh, we're doing this for the poor Black and brown kids. We needed kids walking in knowing that they were chosen because of who they are and their potential. We were very successful with that program. The kids all went to college. And one of the things that we learned is that many of our African American and Latino students were not able to go into their computer science and engineering programs in college because they didn't have the right math classes when they were in high school. They were tracked into the wrong math track. That happened to me when I went to high school. And to see that happen some, 20 something years later, was just wrong. So we started thinking about what can we do around poor education? Can we start a school and partner with a public school district? We didn't want to be a charter school or anything like that. So we spent a couple of years with support from some local foundations doing research and going across the country and meeting with different organizations who ran schools and then meeting with education people here who had expertise because none of us were educators, but we knew how to treat our kids and we knew what they needed to know. So we armed ourselves with all this information and designed a model, tried to get into Seattle public schools, and they weren't interested. We then had a conversation with Federal Way Public Schools, and within 7, 8 months, we had a contract signed. We had a school, and in 2008, we opened Taft Academy. So we've been very successful. We have about a 91% high school graduation rate. We're a 6th through 12th grade school. We had a wait list, and we ended up moving the school to Sahali Middle School and joining forces, and we became Taft and Sahali. The model is really built on educating kids, whole kids, giving
Yeah.
them voice, giving them choice, helping them become self aware and socially conscious, and tying all of that into critical thinking, problem solving, ideation, creation, and leadership, showing them that you don't sit in a classroom and you learn math and then you move over and you're doing reading and then then you're doing science and social studies and all that, and that all these are separate things that have nothing to do with your day-to-day life. We bring all that together and help them see how it impacts their day to day life. So then they absorb the information more and better. The challenge we have right now is that our public school system doesn't work that way. But we kept forging forward. So now we have 7 other schools that are running this model. So they're elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools that have been running this model. It's giving us a chance to see that if we start with you in kindergarten, by the time you get to middle school, you're going to be more than ready. And then if you stay with us through middle school, by the time you get to high school, you're going to be more than ready. You're going to be real sure of who you are, and you're going to be able to determine your own fate as a learner because you understand that learning is a process. It's not the end of every quarter, that we're measuring your growth as a human being.
So, I mean, just for our listeners, if you are interested, please go check out the Technology Access Foundation or the Taft Academy and learn more about this awesome model that Trish and her partners have actually created in rethinking the way we do education. So let's turn to purpose a little bit. And Trish, talk a little bit about why is purpose important for you and how have you used purpose, especially when times get tough?
I look at that as the why and connecting your why to your work. The reason I stay doing this is that we as a people, particularly African Americans, but all underrepresented people of color in our STEM fields, we have not arrived enough for me to say, okay, I got mine. I'm good. I'll volunteer here and there. I'll give a little money here and there and be done. I need to be actionable. I need to be a part of the solution. So I keep doing this and I tie it to my work because one of the things that we know and we have seen, particularly in public education, is when things get tough, people forget about their why. They forget why they came to teach. They forget why they came to lead a school, right? And it's easy to kind of fall back, and our kids can't afford us to do that. We're helping to chart their future. And if we mess up, they don't have a future. So we have to be on point. I don't think we as a society are anywhere close to where our public education system needs to be. And 90% of kids in our country attend public school. So this is a thing that's important for our country as well. And also, almost 60% of public school kids are kids of color, but 90% of the teachers are white. So you got a mismatch and don't live in the community of the schools they work in. So you have this mismatch. So now the reason we are where we are is you got one segment of the population forming education and how to live for another part of the population that doesn't even look like them or live like them. So we're missing the whole history of who we are. We're missing our importance as people of color because it's diminished by the people who are teaching. And we need to fix that as a whole. We can't just sit back. So no, not everybody has to run a program, right? But we all have to care enough to understand the problems that we have here. It's bigger than TAF in Seattle and King County and Pierce County and Washington State. It's much bigger than that. And we want to be a part of the work of turning around public education. Too many people make money off of public education without adding value. It's very extractive. And our kids are the ones who suffer.
I just love this notion of show up with purpose and leave behind something rather than taking something.
Yes.
Purpose allows you to leave something behind and not just extract value.
Yes.
You have to create value.
That's right. When people come to work at TAF, one of the things we say is we want you to be here as long as you can. The most important thing is that you leave a legacy so we can point to something you did that moved the ball.
Let's end by you just sharing your one golden nugget, a piece of wisdom that you have lived by and that you believe our listeners should follow.
I think that everything happens in the time it's supposed to happen and the reason it's supposed to happen. And that includes you taking action and people coming into your life.
I love to say yes to anything. And simply because it actually brings people into my life. And sometimes those what comes in is just extraordinary. And there are times it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, if you let people in, which is really what you're saying, you're actually becoming part of humanity
Yes.
in
Yeah.
all its forms.
Yes.
And that to me is just such a wonderful way to live. So I greatly appreciate it. Trish, thank you so very much for being part of this conversation. Again, purpose is that renewable source of energy that drives humanity forward. To all our listeners, go check out the work that Trish Millines Dziko is doing at the TAP Academy and the TAP Foundation. And until next time, Trish, thank you so very much.
This is great. Thank you.